Hello, bookish people of the internet. Welcome to another video. Today we're going to do a quick kind of rapid fire review wrap up for my Reddit bingo of the last year. So for those of you who don't know, the r/r/fantasy whatever Reddit page community have a yearly bingo or readathon where you get 25 prompts and they each have a hard mode and you can read a book to fit any of those prompts, and you are ideally trying to complete a row or get or like a bingo, I guess, but most people I think try to complete the entire thing, which is what I did a couple of years ago. That one time I just tried to read as much as I could to fit all of the hard modes, and I did complete it, but it was catastrophic. Honestly, it was disastrous with capital D. So I actually didn't do that the year after that. Um, and here we are again. This time, I think what I tried was focusing more on how to fit my own books, like in my physical TBR, into the bingo rather than trying to go really out of my way to just find whatever could fit the prompt. And I think that worked much better this year. And because of a bit of school rush and a doctor's appointment and just life, I have to go a bit quickly about this because the readathon actually ends today. We're gonna do smash or pass for this, which is basically just a very quick, like, should you read it or should you not read it? I will just give a very quick premise, and yeah, this is gonna be a quick one. So let's just uh, go straight into it. I will need to open my notes. So let's see. The first one is first in series. So this is obviously the first book in a series. And for this, I read Semiosis, which is the first book in. I don't know what this series is called. And very quick premise: you have humans that are trying to make up a new civilization or like a new society in this planet, and they need to collaborate with plants, very sentient plants in this place. And honestly, for me, this was a pass. Unfortunately, yeah, it was just not exactly what I was expecting, and the sci-fi-ness was not interesting enough for me. So the second one is, let's see, alliterative title. So for this one, I read The Starless Sea. And this is a book that I was looking forward to reading a lot, but unfortunately, it was also a pass for me. I don't know, it was just too fluffy. I think the vibes were there, and the writing is very beautiful, but unfortunately, I think for the project of this book, it's just way too long and I think too meandering sometimes. And I wish it had, like, I don't know, wrapped or connected all of the stories that we get better together. So beautiful writing, but just I think not a lot beyond that. So pass for me. Um, the next one is Under the Surface. So this is a book that is mainly set underground or underwater, or at least it should be an important part of the setting. And for this, I read Our Wives Under the Sea, which is definitely a smash. This was a very interesting story about two wives, and you get the perspective of both of them. And one of them comes back from an underwater expedition that changes her uh, dramatically, and so the other, or I guess both of them, need to kind of figure out. But mostly it's just one of them trying to figure out how to live with this person that is no longer her wife, as at least as she knew her, and what that means for like herself, their marriage. Really unsettling. A lot of like body horror. Really good book. Amazing prose also. So definitely a smash. Yeah. So the next one is Criminals, and this one is basically that the main character is a criminal. And for this, I basically put any of the Age of Madness books by Abercrombie. Honestly, everyone, I mean, I think the spirit of the square was like a proper thief or a criminal, but honestly, everyone in this world is awful. So I think I put the wisdom of crowds because that's kind of where everything explodes. But you could also put the, what's it called? Oh wait, that's the third book. So anyway, The Trouble with Peace could also fit. So any of these two, I think, has characters where all of them are kind of not great people, and I think it's safe to say for all of them that they do criminal or unethical things. So yeah, I think it just fits The next prompt is dreams, and it's just very simple. You need to have a character that experiences dreams, magical or not. And for this, I picked, or I read Cadáver Exquisito, or Tender is the Flesh in English. Uh, yeah, this I think was a smash for me. I think it's a very controversial book. I think it's very understandable if it doesn't really land for you, but I think that all the violence portrayed has meaning, and I think it was a very interesting character exploration, so definitely a smash. The next one is entitled Animals, which is just that the title of the book needs to include an animal, and for that I chose Nine Fox Gambit, and Nine Fox is a magical creature, so it actually fits the hard mode. And this was unfortunately a pass for me. I've talked about this a bit, but basically the world building was very interesting because it's a kind of space opera story where a lot of math or equations are kind of part of the world building. But unfortunately, the way this story is told is through the perspective of mostly of one character, and I just didn't like being in her head all the time, especially when you have a conflict that lends itself to having kind of different point of views to see how factions are handling the issue. There's a lot of kind of hidden information in this story, so I think it would have benefited from other point of views. And even though the world building, as I said, is kind of interesting, I just didn't like being in inside this kind of cockpit or the bridge of a kind of big ship observing a big battle. I would have liked a more kind of a closer, a more personal um, narrative style, I guess. So this was unfortunately a pass for me. Next is bards, and this one was hard because you had to have a bard, a proper bard, or some kind of storyteller. And fortunately, I did read one, which is The Empress of Salt and Fortune, which is the first book in a novella series. And this was a smash for me. I really like this one. It's very short, so of course you will never get the same amount of like emotional connection, but you have this kind of storyteller that is, yeah, narrating stories about this kind of weird kingdom, and in particular this has to do with an empress. And yeah, it's so short that I don't want to say more, but it's kind of cool, so I'll definitely say smash. um okay, so the next one, Prologues and Epilogues, obviously a book that has both. And for this I have a memory called Empire, which was also a pass. Okay, so maybe this is not going as great for me as I thought, but the reason why I just didn't like this space opera story was that we follow a character that lands on this city for the first time, and she's kind of put into this conspiracy slash political kind of maneuvering game that she just lights into very quickly. And I don't know, I feel like we just didn't have enough connection between her and the problems that were happening to care. And so I didn't know why she cared, or why we had to care when she had been like 2 3 days, and there were all of these kind of problems that we are just talked about, but we just kind of observed from very far away. So again, I think this was a problem where we didn't have any point of view from the perspective of the people suffering from these problems, but rather everything was kind of political maneuvering, and like uh, yeah, I don't know, like people talking with each other and trying to figure out the truth, because this character has um, or is supposed to have the memories of her predecessor, like the person working on the same role before her. She was supposed to have all of that memory to kind of help her guide her through this maneuvering, but unfortunately, the device that has all of that information is is failing, and so basically she needs to do all of this on her own. There is a sapphic element to the story, which I actually did enjoy. The conversations between these two female characters were always fun, but I think at the end of the day, I just never connected with the story, with the problems, uh, or the world in general. So this was a pass for me. The next one is self-published book, and for this I'm going to shout out Slowborn Horror, which is an anthology of short stories by different authors. I know one of the authors actually, so that's kind of fun. And all of these have a domestic setting, or have to do with this kind of slow burn eerie mood. They are very fun. I would definitely recommend this for people who like horror anthologies, and it's always cool to support independent authors. So definitely a smash. The next one is Romantasy, and this is a subgenre that I haven't really read a ton of. So my planned book was Strange and Sober Endurance, which I haven't read. So hopefully by the end of this year I will. I know this is a story about forced marriage. I think they need to get together for political reasons, and I think one of the characters really needs to work with his own trauma. I think it's a very hard story because it has potentially a lot of yeah, like recovering from abuse, uh, but I think at the end of the day it's a very kind of wholesome, or maybe not wholesome, but at least I know it's a very good representation of this process. So I'm just really interested to read this in a fantastical setting. And again, I'm not really a romantasy reader, so I really want to try this one just to see what's there. The next one is Dark Academia, which is also not a genre that I read a lot, but I was very happy to try. And I read Summer Sons. This one I would say it's a very light smash. Was not my favorite, but I think I would recommend it. This is the story of um a teenager or like a young adult that needs to go back to a city to kind of trace back the death of a very close friend of his. And this is a friend that he had lived a very impactful event when they were very young. And so he kind of really needs to unpack that. There is queerness, there are ghosts. It's not super heavy on the academia, but I would say, I mean, the setting is basically a college town, so I think it counts. And yeah, I think I'm still interested in reading a bit more, even though I know it's might not be my favorite genre, but yeah, a very light, but for sure a smash. The next one is a multi POV, and it needs to be at least three different point of views. And for this, I just picked Children of Ruin. This is an absolute pass, the biggest pass on this entire list. Get as far away as you can from this book. um, yeah, I just did not love this project at all. I already talked about it a lot, so let's just go on with it. The next one is a published in 2024, and I don't have any book that fits this square. The next one is a character with a disability, physical or mental, and for that I have Sorrowland. And now that I remember, I read this book a long time ago and I actually did not really like it. So obviously that's a pass for me. I think the main character has dyslexia or some kind of viewing impairment. Um, yeah, this is also a story about trauma. There is very cool queer representation. There is kind of this monster story going in parallel. There's some like religious deconstruction, a lot of kind of coming of age. So I would say if those are um, words that kind of interest you, I would pick this up, but it just did not work for me. Um, the next one is published in the 90s, and for this, I have The Memory Police. I would say this is also a light smash. So the story basically focuses on a town where things disappear, and basically people start forgetting things from one day to the next. So maybe one day it's like birds, and then no one really remembers what birds means. And you have the main character who can remember all of these things. And so obviously it's a story about uh, history and identity and uh, how we deal with like as a society with these kind of issues. I read this one as part of a book club, which was fun. I think it was great for discussion. This is also a book in translation from Japanese, so all of that I think was good for the reading experience. I think for me the biggest issue was that the writing style is very emotionless, and you have a character that literally like doesn't communicate any emotion, and I think it's very hard for me personally to connect to characters that are like this. Then we have orcs, trolls, and goblins, and for these I didn't really read anything that exactly has this. I want to read the Shadow. What is it called? The Shadow of the Gods trilogy, and I think that has orcs. So that was my intended pick for this. Um, if I want to cheat a bit and repeat authors, which is something that people avoid when feeling this bingo thing, I could technically say a Malazan book, for instance, Reaper's Gale. It has a lot of races that are orc-like. Um, and so I mean, this is my video, so I would say that counts. But for the Puritans out there, I guess, yeah, I would need to repeat an author, and it's not technically, like, strictly speaking, orcs and trolls in the classical sense, but these characters are, or these races, I guess, are heavily inspired in D&D races, and they are like basically the world's version of an orc, so, or a troll, for instance. So I think it counts. And definitely a Smash. Obviously, I mean, Reaper's Gale was not my favorite Malazan so far, probably on the lower end of the list. But still, I think it had some of the best moments. At least I'm thinking of one scene, which is probably my top three scenes of all Malazan so far. So I think as a whole, I would say Smash, even though, like, relatively speaking, in Malazan, it's not my favorite, but Smash. Then we have a space opera, and that is going to be Old Man's War by John Scalzi. This, I think this was also fun. It was a Smash, nothing like super life changing. This tells the story of a human organization in the future who offers all people the chance to be kind of rejuvenated, is that a word? By becoming soldiers. So basically, they uh, are sent to like a very far away colony somewhere in space, and humans are doing, I guess, their colonization shenanigans. But in exchange for becoming soldiers, they basically get a new body. So they go back to being physically very young. They are like great athletes. They become even, I think, stronger and like faster. So they have like these enhanced physical traits in exchange for being soldiers. And I mean, I think it was very fun. John Scalzi has a very humoristic writing style. I think the story was kind of simplistic, but I think it's a really cool idea. And I think the interactions of the main kind of friend group was very fun. It's also very short, so I don't think it like overstays its welcome. And I think I will eventually continue with this story. So yeah, a quick fun read, definitely a funny Smash. The next one is a book written by an author of color, and for this I'm going to say The Banished Birds by Simon Jimenez, and this is an absolute smash. This book was amazing. You have a crew that needs to take care of a kid, and they are hiding this kid from this kind of big corporation slash empire for unknown reasons, and you get the story from the perspective of the kid sometimes, a woman that is kind of his mother figure who is amazing. You have also someone like the woman that founded this corporation and that has kind of the history of the scientific trials that involve this kid, and some other things. You have found family. You have a very kind of very mild but beautiful queer coming of age subplot that I really liked. The writing is beautiful. The prologue is amazing. Like the first chapter in the story, I don't know if that's like a short story that was published before or not, but I mean, just that first chapter is beautiful. So yeah, 100% a smash. The next one is survival. So the primary goal of the characters needs to be to survive. And for this, I who have never known men. Also a big smash. Very quickly, you have a woman, or in the start of the story, she's a girl that has grown up her entire life inside a cage with 50-ish other women, and all of these women are kind of being patrolled or like taken care of by these male guards, and she doesn't know why she's there. She has never really experienced life outside of this cage, and very quickly, like in the start of the book, one day the cage is open and the guards are not there, and all of them are kind of free to go. And it's a story about kind of sisterhood slash womanhood, and how she grows out without any of like the stereotypes or social pressures or attachments that maybe her the other woman in her life did with, like, I mean, because they grew up in the quote unquote normal world, and at the same time she's kind of trying to find herself in this world, and obviously talks a lot about what it means to be a human, to age, and to live in community, and how that living in community kind of obviously conflicts with your individual needs. Yeah, it was a beautiful story, very short but very impactful. So big smash. Let's see. The next one is Judge a book by its cover, and that is going to be Black Leopard, Red Wolf, an amazing cover. I didn't know anything about this book besides before I started reading it. I love this African inspired epic fantasy that is extremely grim and violent, but I don't know, it's really hard to describe it, but I've talked about this. If you are watching this, you probably know um, what I think about it, but a big smash. I cannot recommend this enough, even though look up all the content warnings. Okay, we're getting to the end. So, set in a small town. For this, I have Crónica de una muerte anunciada. This is a story of a character that receives a letter saying that, or foretelling that he's going to be killed, but he never gets to see this letter. And everyone in the town, I mean, this is set in a very small fictional town, and everyone in town knows about this letter and about the intentions for these two guys to kill the main character, and yet no one kind of tells him, and everyone just assumes that he knows, even though he actually never got to know this. This is a story about the problems or the dangers of not acting, and how things, very simple, like in this case this murder, could have been very easily avoided because everyone knew who like the perpetrators were, their intentions, who they were targeting, and like no one did anything about it. So obviously that is kind of what's happening in the world right now, which is very scary, obviously to a much bigger scale, but I mean, it was a very short read. I don't really like Gabriel Garcia Marquez writing style so much, but I think because it's so short, it really worked for me. So definitely a smash. Let's see. The next one is 5 short stories. So for this one, I have Ansibles, Perfiladores y otras máquinas de ingenio. I've also talked about this in my books from Mexico list. This was an amazing short story collection centered in Mexico, or like taking place in Mexico, and it has some stories that have to do with like funny gadgets, or just what Mexico in kind of the futuristic future could look like. I thought this was amazing, and even though it doesn't have a translation, I don't think, if you know Spanish, I would really recommend this. And yeah, support more Mexican authors. The next one is Eldritch Creatures, and for this I have The City We Became by M.K. Jemisin, and this was a huge disappointment for me, so definitely a pass. And I just thought the way she handled the themes in the story was a bit too obvious, or too, like, I don't know, heavy-handed, which is not always a problem. Like, definitely don't think that in and of itself it's a problem, but it just, I don't know, it just felt too caricaturistic for me. Yeah, a pass. But people love it, so maybe check it out, but not for me. Okay, almost done. So the next one is reference material, and this is just a book with a lot of maps, footnotes, glossary, translation, dramatis personae, things like that. And for that, I will put The Bone Hunters, also from Malazan, which has probably everything that I mentioned. This one is kind of interesting because you have what really feels like 2 different books put together for reasons. The first one being very interesting, very epic. You have this story of survival, and it's a chapter that lasts for like 4 hours if you listen to it. So it's a huge kind of series of events that just kind of keep going about survival, and it gives the kind of the title of the story, The Bone Hunters. Really big smash. Really liked this entry into Malazan, and it has definitely a lot of reference material. And then the last one, yay, we got to the end. So the last one is a book that has been part of the book club of, like, one of Reddit's many book clubs. So there's almost anything that is popular that you can think of has been there. And for this, I just picked Her Body and Other Parties. This was a smash. This is a short story collection focusing on the kind of female perspective and the female experience or relationship with the body in different ways. Maria, the author, I think she's Carmen Maria Machado, something like that. The author really likes writing about horror, so a lot of these stories have a horror element or use horror as a way to talk about the body, which I think is obviously very fitting. So there is body horror, just so you know, but I think she has a kind of very honest, very raw voice. She doesn't really pull back from anything, and I think it was really cool. It has a lot of queer representation, which was fun. The author herself is Latina, so you have, I think, a lot of intersectionality in these stories. So really, really, really good one. Yeah, and we got to the end of the list. Yay! So I know this was pretty fast, but I think that was kind of the idea. I will put like some counters, so by the end of this, I hope the smashes were larger than the passes, like in amount. We'll see. But yeah, I think this was a good experience. I don't know if I will be doing this fantasy bingo thing next year, or like I'm definitely not doing it this year. Um, but I think overall it was a good experience. I also will put a counter somewhere for how many of these books were from my shelf, which I think was also part of why I did it last year. Yeah, I don't think I have anything else to say. So thank you so much for watching and have a great day.